Just because you have sight doesn't mean you can see. For 3 weeks in a row, we've had some very dense readings from the Gospel of John. The story of Nicodemus, the Samaritan woman at the well, and today, the healing of the blind man. These are big, long readings that deal with some very heavy theological concepts. In each of these, Jesus uses metaphor to talk about spirituality. He talks about being born again as a way of describing spiritual renewal and transformation. He talks about drinking living water as a way of being spiritually sustained and made whole. And today, he uses blindness as a spiritual metaphor. He heals a man's sight, but uses that moment to talk about a deeper type of seeing. To give it a more churchy word, we might call it contemplative seeing. The word contemplation comes from 2 Latin words. It's your Latin lesson for the day. Cum, which means with, and templum, which means temple or sacred space. So it is seeing with God, or seeing as God sees. As you know, there are many ways to see. There's the literal seeing, I see a forest. There's an analytical seeing, I see many trees. There's a poetical seeing, I see an enchanted wood. And then there's a mystical, contemplative way of seeing. I see in this forest the creation of God, the fingerprints of the Maker, the spiritual ecosystem of which my soul is one part. When you look at something contemplatively, you look beyond its surface and you see the presence of God. Seeing contemplatively is seeing the heart. In today's story, Jesus heals a man's sight, literally. He spits on the dirt, smears the mud on the blind man's eyes, tells him to wash it off, and suddenly the man sees. Don't ask me why Jesus did this. No one knows. There's no consensus on how even to interpret that. But because there is so much metaphor and symbolism in John's gospel, I believe we're invited to wonder. I see it as a symbol of the divine mixing with the mundane, an embodiment of faith, a reminder that spirituality is not just about your head, but is rooted in something real and physical. The blind man is now literally seeing God, seeing contemplatively. But people can't see him this way. His neighbors don't even recognize him. It can't be the same man, they say. No, it's him. It's someone like him. They're convinced they know him. He's the blind man down the street. Everyone knows the blind guy, but once he's healed, he doesn't fit their labels anymore. If he's not the blind man, then who is he? Dave, Ted, they don't know. I doubt they even ever knew his name because they never looked past his label. They never saw him. When we are labeled, people can struggle to see beyond that label. He's lazy, she's difficult, they're the black sheep of the family. They think they know. They know so well. They think they stop seeing you when you grow, when you change, when you try to heal, when you tear off the labels they put on you, and that makes them uncomfortable, and they will resist it. There is enormous pressure to keep you in a box to which they've grown accustomed. Here's an example. My brother suffered with substance abuse, and he's given me permission to share this story, by the way. He has suffered under the effects of drug use for decades, and I confess that we labeled him a drug addict. It's very hard to see past that label. In our minds, that's who he is, drug addict, a functional addict, but forever an addict. Some time ago, a terrible accident forced him to get clean. Outreach workers checked on his status daily, and after over a year, he was drug-free, or as he says, clean. He has stayed drug-free and now has a good job as a nurse caring for people with addiction issues in the downtown east side of Vancouver. Things are going well for him. And yet, even if his skin looks healthier, even if he's happier and back to himself, even though he's a good parent to his son, even if he's a good son to his parents, even though his recovery was professionally documented, even though it's been years, we struggle to see past his label. He's healed, but we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. He's healed, but how long will it really last? We are the ones determined to keep that label on him. And doing so doesn't help his recovery. Without being aware of it, we keep pushing him into the box named drug addict. And that is all we ever want to see. We never want to see him. The Pharisees do the same with Jesus. The Pharisees think they know Jesus. They've seen him, seen his act, seen his little spiel. He's a traveling preacher hoax. They've seen it all before. But Jesus does something that doesn't fit the box they've put him in. He heals a man born blind. A hoax could not have done that healing. There is real power in what Jesus did. If Jesus is a hoax, a huckster, how could he have healed? Instead of changing their perspective on Jesus, the Pharisees hunt for any way to shove him back into the box. Jesus is just a sinner, they say. But then how could a sinner bring healing? Or maybe the blind man wasn't really blind. They even drag the man's parents. They repeat this whole debate because they can't wrap their minds around who Jesus is. They see Jesus as a hoax. So therefore, this healing could never have happened. They literally refuse to see what's right in front of them. When events don't fit our narrative, we go into extreme lengths to see only what we want to see. When we hear that a clergy person or a celebrity or someone we respect has been guilty of a bad behavior, one of the first reactions we have is defensiveness. This person could not possibly have done that because we've seen them. We know them. We know what they're like. The victim discloses information that we all question. We question our ability to judge a person's character. It challenges our perception of things, and we don't want to see it. Victims are expelled, and the church or society looks the other way as harm is allowed to continue. This is what happened with the residential school system. We wanted to see the church saving indigenous children, so we refused to look at children being snatched from their homes. Those who tried to draw our attention to the harm being done were ignored, rejected, labeled, mocked. I can't even imagine how difficult it was, how frustrating it was for those first indigenous activists who got us to stop and look at what Canada was doing. They held a mirror to ourselves, but it took a long time before we can look at that mirror. We might have sight, but we don't really see. The Pharisees decided what they wanted to see. And so the person who didn't fit that narrative, the healed man, needed to be kicked out. They were so angry at a man who did nothing but share his personal experience. The Bible says they drove him out. When you speak up, when you challenge perspectives, when you get people to look at what's really going on, people will get angry. They don't want to see it. You might be doing nothing more than being yourself, honestly and authentically yourself. And that alone enough riles feathers and makes the blood boil. And maybe, like the healed man, you get driven out. It happens. But on the outside, with the rest of the outcasts, with those who don't fit into society's labels, that's where Jesus finds you, like he found the healed man. Jesus asks, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And he answers, "And who is he, sir?" Jesus says, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. You have seen him." To a man born blind, "You have seen him" would be such a powerful thing to hear. Yes, he saw him with his eyes, and he saw him with his heart. And he exclaims, "Lord, I believe." He saw Christ, and Christ saw him. The healed man was seeing contemplatively, that is, with God. He was seeing the spirit, the soul, because his heart was ready. Christ could appear to him and be seen. Oh, if only the Pharisees could have looked contemplatively. They couldn't have seen not a man born blind, but a child of God, a sibling of faith, a reflection of divinity. And if they couldn't have seen that, how else might Jesus have opened their eyes? The moment we cast our eye on someone, we are quick to label and judge them. They say first impressions happen within 30 seconds, and those first impressions are hard to shake. And whether we label someone in a positive or negative light, it's still a label. It's like putting a sticker on our glasses. It gets in the way of seeing the actual person. But if we slow down, pause, look more contemplatively, we can see deeper. We can try to see the way that God does. As it says in 1 Samuel 16, "The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." How might we be different if we looked at the heart instead of appearances? How might we treat people differently? Maybe we could hear each other better, care for one another better, see what our neighbor goes through, see who they really are. And maybe we could look at our own hearts too, look contemplative deeply into who we are, the beautiful and the ugly, looking past the labels we stick onto ourselves and seeing us the way God sees us. Imagine now God seeing you, seeing everything about you, seeing you like no one else sees you, and smiling because of what God sees. You are all the sparkle in God's eye. Let yourself be seen. And then think of the way God sees the person sitting beside you. How does God see the people around you? Look at them and see with your heart this time. Look with your heart, and God will open your eyes.